Come for the bread, stay for the politics. I'm Ben Walsh, and this is Let Them Eat Bread. Welcome to a very special and unusual episode of Let Them Eat Bread. We are filming from my personal office today as opposed to the kitchen studio, and that's because we are not making bread this week, as I announced on our Facebook page. Instead, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do if you've made too much bread, how to store bread, what you can do with leftover bread, and things like that. Then we are going to have a little bit of a shorter of a politics episode. We're just going to talk about a couple of issues. I really just want to hit upon a few things concerning the war in Ukraine, and then that's going to be it. There will be no show next week because I will be away, and then we will pick up, hopefully, unless anything changes, with episode 37 on March 18th. So with that, let's get started. So, say you have too much bread and you, I don't know, are heading for a trip for a week and don't know what to do with it. Or you are about to hit the end of your bread shelf life and you want to save it and savor it so that way you don't waste any bread. So, what are some great ways you can do that? So, let's start with the dilemma of you've made bread and you don't have a lot of time to eat it. So, the first thing you can do is just to freeze that bread so that it's ready for you later. And the way you want to freeze a loaf of bread is you want to make sure that when you're covering it, you do two things. One, you covered at least two layers of whatever it is you're using. I recommend aluminum foil. And second, you want to make sure you cover it in such a way that there are no possible air holes or escapes or anything like that. That allows for you to make sure that there's no way that your bread can kind of get that weird frosty, that can get like um, frostbite isn't really the right term. It's, what's it called? Freezer burn. There we go. That's the one. So that way you make sure your bread doesn't get freezer burn. Now, mind you, your bread's probably not going to get freezer burn if you're just leaving it for about a week. But if you need to freeze your bread for a little longer, like a couple of weeks, then you might want to consider about how to make sure you're not getting freezer burn. So when you're covering your bread, regardless of the bread shape, make sure that you're covering it completely. And even if you have to use multiple pieces of whatever it is you're using, like foil, for example, that still constitutes one layer if you're only putting down one version of it on top of your loaf of bread. Now, you want to make sure you do multiple layers, at least two, to make sure that you don't have an issue with your bread getting freezer burn while it's in the freezer. Okay? And then once you're ready to use it again, it depends on the bread, but most breads you're going to be able to throw in the oven at about 350 degrees for about 30 or 40 minutes. Now you'll know your bread is defrosted if you open it up and kind of feel it. It'll feel soft and squishy. It'll kind of feel like it's been freshly baked. It'll smell freshly baked. And that's kind of how you'll know that it is ready for you to eat. Now, if you have a thermometer, that's obviously the best and safest way to do this is just to poke it in the middle and make sure that center is around room temperature, 70 degrees. You don't need it much. You don't need the inside to be hot because you're not re-cooking the bread, right? The purpose of defrosting it is just that, right? To make sure that the inside and the whole bread is above freezing temperatures. So when you're reheating your bread, just make sure that you are checking it fairly frequently, right? I recommend half an hour to 45 minutes for a frozen bread, but it depends. If you've got a bigger bread, it's going to take longer. If you got a smaller bread, it's going to take a shorter amount of time. Also, it also depends on what kind of bread. If you have a bread that has a lot more air pockets in it versus a bread that's very dense, the bake times are also going to be different. So again, it's less important that you set a time on a timer, but more important that you're checking it regularly and make sure that you've got the kind of the right feel to it, the right temperature on it, and then it looks and feels like it's ready to be eaten again. Okay, so that's what happens if you want to store bread for a long period of time. But what about if you just have too much bread and you want to make something else with it? So there's two roads you can go with this one. Personally, I like to go the sweet route, but a lot of people, understandably, want to go the savory route. So if you're going for the sweet route, I always recommend the easiest thing you can do is to make either French toast or like a French toast casserole. So French toast, you all know, you make it into slices, you dip it in an eggy mixture. Typically, that's like one or two eggs, half a cup of milk, some sugar, and some cinnamon. And then you put it in a frying pan with some butter. You fry it up both sides, coat it with syrup on all your favorite toppings. Or you could make a French toast casserole, which instead of cutting your bread into slices, what you do instead is you cube your bread. So you take the loaf of bread, you cut it into much thicker slices, and then you cut all those slices into little cube pieces, right? And then once you've done that, you take all of those and you put them in a baking container. I usually use glass, like a 9 by 9, like a square container for the most part, because I don't often have a ton of bread left over. But you want to use something that makes it so that you have a little bit of stack in your layer of bread. You don't want it all one big flat layer of bread unless you have a lot of bread that you're doing this with, right? After that, depending on the size of the pan, but for a 9 by 9, you want to use something like 3 or 4 eggs with 1 or 2 cups of milk, quarter cup to half a cup of sugar, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. You mix this all together and then you just pour it all over your bread mixture, chuck it in the oven at around 400 degrees, and let it sit for 30, 40 minutes. Now, again, test it, make sure the egg is completely cooked through all the way because it's not going to cook as it cools down. And then once you've done that, just serve again with fruit or syrup or anything you want. Now that's your savory route. Now, so your sweet route. Your savory route, you can go a number of ways. If your bread is super stale, you can go the croutons route if you want to. You can intentionally toast your bread and then cut it into crouton sizes, or you can cut first and then toast, depending on what you want to do. You can also make your bread into breadcrumbs if you want to just cut the bread into slices, put it, cut those slices into small pieces and then throw them into a food processor. You can create breadcrumbs that you can use. Now, mind you, you'll probably want to toast those, especially if the bread is getting towards the end of its life. So that way you don't have moldy breadcrumbs or breadcrumbs that are, past their due, as it were. But you can use them pretty immediately, right? And we all know the applications for breadcrumbs, deep frying things, and the like. And also meatloaf, right? And other things. So if you don't want to make breadcrumbs and you want to go the kind of casserole route, you can go with like a dinner style casserole, or you can go with like a breakfast style casserole. So your breakfast style casserole is pretty easy. You're going to take your bread cubes, just like you will have done for your sweet French toast casserole. You're going to put the cubes in a similarly sized container, depending on how many you have, and then you're going to want to use like 12 to 15 eggs, right? You really want this roux to be pretty thick on the egg department, and then a pound of whatever breakfast meat of your choosing, sausage rounds, bacon, ham, what have you, cut into appropriate size pieces and cooked if required. And then you're going to mix all that into the egg, and you're going to pour that egg again on top of those breadcrumbs in the oven, 400 degrees for 30, 40 minutes. And then if you want, like sprinkle some chives or spring onions on top. That's into your breakfast casserole. And then finally, if you're looking for like a dinner casserole, you can do it a number of ways. Obviously, you can create layers and put the bread on top. Or if you want to do kind of the egg and pour way that we've been talking about for these other ones, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use slightly fewer eggs, but you're going to want to increase the number of other ingredients you use, right? So say you only use 8 to 12 eggs instead of 12 to 15 eggs. You want to put things like cooked vegetables, or just other vegetables, right? If that's what you're interested in, cut up vegetables, lots of cheese, any meats that you might be interested in, like a rotisserie chicken, like a shredded chicken would be really great for this, or another type of shredded meat. And then you pour that on top. Now this one, because you're not intentionally layering it this way, you can actually go and mix everything together to make sure that your breadcrumbs are thoroughly covered, that the disbursement of meat and vegetables and everything else is the way you want it. Sprinkle some final cheese on if that's what you're interested in. Once again, chuck it in that oven about 400 degrees, and then make sure that you're checking it every 25 minutes. So check the first 25 minutes. It's not done then. You want to give it another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes until it's cooked through. And again, cooked through for all of these dishes where you're making casseroles with egg is the egg is not at all runny at all. It's fully cooked through. It's essentially like souffle consistency. And so that is what you do if you have too much bread and you don't know what to do with it. Hopefully, this baby segment of Let Them Eat Bread has taught you something that you can use if you have too much bread, or if you just want to go to the store, buy an extra loaf of bread, stale it yourself in the oven, and then use it for one of these applications. I personally do this with all of my extra bread so that I'm not wasting any, and I find that it's a great way to make bulk meals that are easy. You just slice them up, chuck them in the microwave, and then you have bulk meals for as long as you need, and bulk breakfast as long as you need. So I find it's a really great way to do that.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.